I'm Allison Pease, Associate Provost for Institutional Effectiveness at John Jay College. I'm back for the third and final Distinguished Teaching Prize interview of 2021. In this interview, I talk with Crystal Leigh Endsley, Associate Professor of Africana Studies, and only the second person at John Jay to have won the award twice. Professor Endsley joined the college in 2013 and first won the Distinguished Teaching Prize in 2016. I begin the interview asking what it means to have won the award twice.
A little surprised, a little shocked. I think that more than the repetition of it is the year that everyone has gone through. And when I think about the generosity of our students, that during such a difficult, challenging, mess of a year, they would still take the time to write a nomination for me when everyone is just struggling and stretched so thin, I think that's what has really stuck out to me so much, because it's a different crop of students, it's different classes, a different time in all of our lives, and so that feels like such an honor,
Yeah, along those lines, winners of the Distinguished Teaching Prize are barred from winning for 5 years after they've won the award. It has been just 5 years for you. To be honest, I think those who've won the Distinguished Teaching Prize before are scrutinized more heavily. The question the TLC advisory board members asked is, how has she grown as a teacher since she originally won the prize? Is this the same application or is it new? Does it show evolution? The answer was that you have demonstrated continued innovation, your teaching has evolved, and everything about your teaching is, the watchword for the advisory board, distinguished. One of the things that sticks out to me is your commitment to experiential learning through doing. You say that your courses explore, quote, how cultural production can work to disrupt oppression. How do you see that working in your classes?
I think the first thing is training our students to really understand that what culture is and cultural production. Because I think that sometimes because it's culture and it's so everyday and it seems so accessible that it doesn't warrant our attention or recognition or research or focus, and culture, it's all of those things that help us cope with the world, right? And with events. So it's the typical things, the art and the religion, and those types of practices. But it's also the sports we play. It's what we believe in, as a group of people. It's what we actions we take, the values that we have, and all of those sorts of things combined. And so to help our students really understand that they produce culture. It's just like how, when we say that we're critical, we believe in critical teaching and learning, it's positioning them as knowledge producers, right? They are co-constructing new knowledge with us in a classroom. And so in the same way, they co-construct culture, they produce culture just like they produce knowledge. And so helping them understand the richness that's really embedded in some of those things that they seem small, they seem everyday, and we kind of take them for granted. And then realizing how much of these really large scale sort of social changes are rooted in everyday productions of culture. And in that, I think that sort of moment of, okay. This is where that comes from. Okay. So it's almost like historically tracing and then finding things in the everyday that can contribute to, of course, we're geared towards social justice, but disrupting oppression, just stopping it or interrupting it or making it harder for oppression to occur, and one of the ways we do that, I believe, is through cultivating moments of joy, of peace, and of like enjoyment together, because it requires us to remember, like, the world is always both, and it is really hard. There are systems of oppression, there are people who abuse power, but we also find moments of pleasure, and a lot of times that pleasure is wrapped up in learning,
And creating.
Yes, exactly.
You use critical hip hop pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what that is and how you've found it effective in your classes?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit more than like hip hop based education, which looks at the elements of hip hop. But it's not just like wrapping the social studies lesson. It's Hamilton, but it's so much more than Hamilton. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so looking at critical hip hop pedagogy, it's always about, we have the elements of hip hop. So we're looking at the body, we're looking at dance, right? We're looking at visual art, we're looking at graffiti. There's, of course, the MC, who it literally means to move the crowd, right? So if you are the MC for the night, if you're rapping, if you've got the microphone, you are responsible for moving the crowd that's listening to you. And then, of course, there's the DJ. And so the DJ is, the DJ really, if we look at hip hop history, the DJ is where it all began, and so, but the DJ, think about the DJ at a party, like you control the rhythm, you control how fast or how slow, you control the tone, you really set the stage for a party or a social gathering. And so when I think about critical hip hop pedagogy, it's engaging with social issues from these various approaches, because the other sort of lesser known element of hip hop is knowledge of self. And so I really believe that knowing ourselves helps us to know others, and it helps us to know how we can create social change, because hip hop is always about innovation. So it's not that everyone who uses, critical hip hop pedagogy is a hip hop artist or a b-boy or a b-girl, but it's saying, I understand this history and the core principles there of creating and innovating and addressing social issues, always looking for a remix, always trying to improve, and it always occurs through collaboration. So there's always a matter of working together, exchanging ideas, building and growing, that's really required with critical hip hop pedagogy in a way that sets the relationship between a student and a teacher automatically in much more of a dialogue or an exchange. So being a co-collaborator, rather than, just receiving the top-down information that's being dispensed, from a teacher. And so I think at a really basic level, or like in any sort of class, thinking about the structure, that's the critical part of it, right? Because it disrupts, it interrupts like typical power dynamics that are occurring in traditional classroom settings, like what we think about and what we when we think about a classroom.
You took a TLC seminar in problem or project-based learning, and you've applied PBL, as we call it, in your courses. I'm really excited about project-based learning. Mm-hmm. I think it underscores what each of this year's Distinguished Teaching Prize winners have in common, which is their belief that students learn by doing. For our listeners, can you describe your assignment on blackout data poems and how you set it up and how it came out?
Yes. So I was really excited to work on this project. And I really have to shout out the TLC and all of the kind of the variety that they've offered in opportunities just for kind of experimentation, Mm-hmm. I think that we lose that sometimes in pressure to always get things right. We lose the that time and space that you need to kind of experiment or test things out. So this project-based learning assignment it's for a 200 level class for poetic justice. And so I was able to invite a guest artist, Dr. Tony Keith, to come to class. And so he came up with this research method for his dissertation. But before we even got to this creative research method, we really began with some very familiar, very traditional types of assignments when you're looking to do any sort of research project. So there was, find a research question. What's an annotated bibliography? Like we really, we like met with the library. They'll do those kind of introductory workshops around an annotated bibliography. Also the Writing Center, Roxanne, I forget her last name, but she's wonderful there. And her workshop on an annotated bibliography. And so the students aren't plunged entirely into this brand new research method, but we say, hey, here's a way you're used to thinking about asking questions for research. So from there, I said, okay, we've got to come up with a question that involves your community or a community of color. So if you live in the Bronx and you want to research something that affects people who live in the Bronx, great. If you are interested in Puerto Rico and you want to investigate something that's a social issue that's impacting folks in Puerto Rico, that's great. But they had to root their question and their focus around a community of color. So either their home community or a place or a location that they were really connected to in some way, so that there was a little bit at least of personal investment there. And then from that research question, we built interviews. And so again, pretty traditional, like it wasn't a brand new method they were learning, conducting interviews, but the types of questions they were asking, depending on what their social issue was, got really personal for students there, right? Because especially if they were thinking about their own communities or the types of families they grew up in, or an issue, sometimes they wanted to look at Latinx students that were first generation college students in their experience. Some of them wanted to look at like very explicitly environmental justice concerns, so pollution or access to clean water in certain communities. It really varied. So the interviews, they conducted traditional interviews. And then based on Dr. Keith's in-class workshop, after they took their interview transcripts, and he walked them through how he collected data based on interview transcripts. And so I don't know if you've seen like regular blackout poetry. There are examples, and it looks like someone just takes like a black highlighter and marks out certain words and phrases so that a certain, like a poem is left. So it's really, I think it was Audre Lorde that said, poetry distills our experience. And it's really a distillation of their language and the core keys and ideas. The difference for Dr. Keith's method is that we are taking these interviews about this research question. So you've got some scholarship, shaping your approach. You've got lived experience from people that you've spoken with, shaping your insight. And so we take that transcription, and the students themselves have to black out that interview transcript until only that core poem, the core poetry, and findings are left. So they're creating a poem, a blackout poem, out of an interview transcript about their research. And so it really foregrounds the power and the ethics of research. So whose stories get told, by whom, and why? And how do we then amplify that? Because it also sort of calls into question, we're not just creating these really cool visual blackout poems from these interviews, for our presentations, for our findings, but then they're asked to perform those poems. So you interview this person with all of that emotion and their experience, then you have to take that lived experience, really distill it down to the core function, and then share that as poetry in public. And so there's a lot of talk about, how does this make the academy more accessible? How does it make scholarship accessible to the communities that are researched right? And then what does it mean for you if you're a member of a community that you're researching, right? So you're both a subject and a researcher. How does that power feel different? How do you deflect it? How do you reflect it back to the folks that you're researching? And then how do you present your research in a way that is traditional and scholarly? Because there's a place for theorization, there's a place for the intellectual, the high language, there's a place for that. And we have to learn how to do that. How do we also take the same thing and make it accessible and meaningful for the communities that we extracted this data from? So it opens up so many, it really makes you vulnerable, right? You have to examine yourself. You have to be so self-reflexive in this experience. So it's long and it's a detailed project. It's a lot of work, right? But there are many steps, but it is so rich and really impactful.
Yeah, it seems that you would need so many skills and practice so many skills as you create it.
Because even if you're only doing like the traditional, because I think a lot of times our students it's like they don't view themselves as producers of culture in a valuable way. You know what I mean? And I think in the same way, they don't see themselves as researchers. They see themselves as completing an assignment until they understand like, oh, I'm implicated in this outcome. Like I am responsible as a researcher for who has access to this information and what the information does out in the world later on, And I think, again, that's like the hip hop element. That's the critical hip hop pedagogy, is because it's not like you're dumbing down the info. It's the same information. You are remixing it into something totally different for a totally different audience. And it's like, it's beautiful, or it can be, right?
Right. Is there anything you've discovered about teaching and learning this year during the pandemic that you'll carry forward with you?
Ooh, I feel as if we have all discovered so much about ourselves. I just think that the humanity that is required in this profession cannot be overstated. When our students feel recognized as whole human beings, beyond their grade, beyond their success in the class, when they understand us as whole human beings, that are impacted by the same things. And I don't think that type of connection can be overstated either. And the necessity of creative work in moments of crisis. It's the first thing that goes. It's the first thing that gets, cut because, just do the main project or just do the main assignment or, just get it done so we can get a grade in. And I think that has had to shift for all of us this year, because we were all impacted in so many different and unpredictable ways, uncontrollable ways. And without having those tools, those same cultural tools to cope or to connect with each other, we suffer. We really suffer. Our communication suffers. And I think the type of isolation that we have experienced in different levels, in different ways this past year, we've all had to dig so deep. And at the end of the day, the same thing that you come up with is just, if we're going to make it through, make it beyond, we need each other. We need each other desperately. And I think just a moment of recognizing humanity in every class. I think we cannot shortchange ourselves of that, even if it's just a brief moment, just an acknowledgement. of it. And I think also the creativity, the students' creativity, the drive that they have, and their real commitment, you know, and the kinds of questions they ask, the kinds of questions I'm asking, like what really is the priority? What really matters? Like, what is the point of all of it? Like, what is the point when the world shuts down, when the world is at war? Like, what is the point of everything that we do? And I think asking those kinds of questions and not always having nice, clear answers, it keeps us coming back.
Yeah. So you've now been publicly acknowledged as a distinguished teacher twice. Is there something that you still want to get better at as a teacher?
Oh, I think always. And if I may be so bold,
You may.
thank you. I think that's why I've received this honor twice, is because I look for, not because I've arrived anywhere, but because I have not stopped engaging with that question. Like, where else do I need to grow? Where else can I improve? What am I learning? Because as much as I know, if we really buy into this critical pedagogy thing, then I am a student every semester. I'm a student. I'm learning. I'm always learning, and I'm always in that relationship of co-construction with our students. And so being in that position, that humility of I've got to get better. I don't know everything, right? I'm an expert facilitator. I know a lot about some of these subjects, but I'm not an expert on anything except being Crystal Leigh Endsley, but just be that willingness, I think, and the eagerness to where can I grow next? Okay, I think I've got this. Okay, but this part was kind of weak. How can I strengthen that? I think that's the only reason why I would be recognized twice. And I feel like, of course, technology, I mean, again, all of those shortcomings I have, and I've taught online before. That's the crazy thing. But just trying to learn different things and make it engaging and make it accessible and find new sources. But I think there's always room, like technologically, to grow. There's always new scholarship, new texts, new materials and content, that I want to engage with. So I feel like there's always something. I think last year highlights the technology, but there's always,
In this world where technology is what enables us to communicate with our students, I've thought about you because I know that you're interested in embodied teaching and learning. Mm-hmm. I know that performance is a part of what you do. How are you getting around the absence of bodies in our learning space?
It's challenging, right? But I think the issue, I can't expect the same type of performance to happen because that's kind of crazy, right? Like it's not going to be the same, and that's got to be okay. But my job is to find out, okay, but how are we performing, or how are we engaging? If we're not doing what I'm used to, what I prefer, or what I'm the best at, or my strongest, like I can read a room, you know what I'm saying? So, but like, how do you read your screen? But so that's the challenge, is not looking for exactly the same type of engagement or the same type of feedback. Right. So it's got to come from somewhere else. So what is that new thing that I've either got to learn or develop or figure out with our students that's going to provide the connection, the performance and the feedback that I'm so used to, or that I've come to really rely on, and then what do I need to be flexible with? Like, I'm going to be honest, like the Zoom chat, I had to get used to that. I had to get used to, because I was so distracted at first, like, it's like people passing notes in class, like they're talking in class, and I'm like, I can't concentrate. And then I realized you're looking at it the wrong way. Like, this is feedback, this is dialogue, this is performance in the chat, you know? And so even something as simple as that, just I have to reconfigure, and it's back to that remix, right? Like, okay, we've got different tools at our disposal now. And I can mourn what's lost, right? And there's space for that too. But how can I make something new with what I've got? You know, because that's hip hop. That's at the root. You know, that's what it is. How can I create something that's going to be pleasurable, enjoyable, accomplish a goal, maybe shift some things, you know, but I've got to let go kind of what I'm, and it's hard because you know, I enjoy that embodied learning, you know, but it just looks different now. So what do I have to do to learn to get fluent, right? In this new language of embodiment.
Crystal Leigh Endsley, winner of the 2021 Distinguished Teaching Prize and the 2016 Distinguished Teaching Prize. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it so much, Allison. I really do. Thank you.